Hello and welcome to the Third Sector podcast. I'm Dami Adewale.
And I'm Lucinda Rouse. Each week we bring you half an hour of discussion and debate about the important goings-on in the charity world. This week we'll be thinking about how charities that are busy with the important task of delivering vital services are able to take a step back, embrace new technologies and try out alternative ways of doing things. And we're going to hear from one organisation that is on such a path.
The organisation in question is Young Lives vs Cancer, and we're joined for this discussion by Helen McShane, who is the Director of Research, Innovation and Systems Change at the charity. Hi, Helen.
Hi.
You are also the Director of the recently launched Young Lives Innovation Lab. It's aiming to improve the experiences and outcomes of cancer care for children and young people. We'll go into what the lab is doing in just a bit, but to start with, could you tell us about how you came to the realization that you needed to think about a new way of doing things?
So the Young Lives Innovation Lab, we launched it really as a bit of an experiment, I suppose, to help us think about how we could use the assets and the things that we already have as a charity, how we could use them in completely different ways, but to drive impact and change for young cancer patients. We knew that there were already lots of interesting early stage ventures out there. So new businesses that were already creating quite innovative new products and services that could work for young cancer patients. If those businesses are successful, they are by their nature sustainable and scalable, perhaps in ways that we can't be as a charity. So we went out and asked lots of entrepreneurs and people in that space, is there something that we as a charity could bring that could be valuable to stuff that's already happening out there? And the answer was a resounding yes. So that led us into thinking about how we could use those assets. So by that, I mean things like, trusted access to thousands of young people and families, our data and insight, our networks, our brand. We realized that we could use those things to support these early stage ventures to create solutions that work for young cancer patients. So the idea is that we kind of each bring our own skills and experience, and together we're more than the sum of our parts.
And as a charity, as well as being more than a sum of your own parts, why did you think that it was necessary to be engaging with these other service providers, the holders of potential solutions? You are a very well-known charity brand, fantastic fundraising, delivering services to children and young people with cancer and their families, primarily social work services. Why did you think we need to start thinking about new ways of delivering those services?
It all started, I would say, probably a year to 2 years ago. We had commissioned a major piece of independent research into the needs and experiences of young people. We did that with some of our key charity partners. And from that research, we worked with our partners to create a really big, ambitious vision of the future, which we call our North Star vision. And that's a vision that's shared and held across the sector of people working with this group. But creating that vision, I think, made us realize that we will never reach that point if we simply just keep doing what we're doing and only that. Like, we could never scale our services up, for example, in order to reach that vision. There has to be different ways of getting there. Before I started this role, I spent years leading our frontline services at Young Lives vs Cancer, and that experience taught me that we're never going to be able to meet all of those needs. There will always be gaps. Our frontline colleagues are always going to be holding that tension. And so it prompted us to think a bit more deeply about, is there a different role that we can play, as well as continuing to deliver those vital services? Is there a bigger role that we can play in terms of shaping what actually gets built within the system? And so the Young Lives Innovation Lab is one route for us to do that. Not the only route, but one route.
And speaking of that route, if you could just give us a brief explanation of the Young Lives Innovation Lab.
As I was saying, it's about using those assets, the things that we have as a charity that we're sort of sitting on, and using them in a different way. So the idea is that we partner with those early stage ventures, those new businesses. We bring the skills and expertise that we hold as a charity. And for Young Lives versus Cancer, that's all about the psychosocial experience of having cancer, how to manage the impact of that on every aspect of your life, whether that's from mental health to education to employment to financial resilience. And so that's what we're interested in when we partner with ventures. So to bring that to life, an example of a business that we might partner with is somebody that is creating a digital platform that helps to reduce anxiety and trauma in children, for example, when they're maybe having medical procedures or going into hospitals and scary environments. So we might partner with a venture that's working on a solution to that, or a venture that is perhaps creating a tech-enabled solution that connects to a family's bank account and helps them to manage unexpected costs that cancer throws up, and helps them to maximize the benefits that they're entitled to and other kinds of support. Working with those kind of ventures, those very impact-driven, mission-aligned ventures, what we have as a charity can be really helpful to them, because it gives them, a trusted route into the real world. It gives them opportunities to properly understand the problems that people face and to design around those with families, and then test those solutions in the real world.
And who is the initiator in that? Is it a case of Young Lives versus Cancer saying we've got this innovation lab and proactively reaching out to potential solutions developers, providers, and so on? Or are you inviting companies to come to you with perhaps the seeds of ideas that you could develop together?
It's a bit of both, to be honest. Before we started really thinking about this seriously, we were getting approached by the odd company that had come to us and say, look, we're developing this, it would be great to work with you on that. And we never really had the headspace or the capacity to engage in those conversations. So we do get companies coming to us, and we have spent time building networks in this venture ecosystem, this innovation ecosystem, building networks, raising our profile, building relationships so that people know what we are interested in, what we can offer. So it's a bit of us raising our profile, promoting ourselves with these audiences, and then ventures coming to us with a pitch or a proposal.
And it sounds like a lot of work in itself. And like you said previously, you struggled to have the headspace as an organisation to really be engaging and grabbing those opportunities if they came across your desk. So practically speaking, what have you had to change within the organisation to enable this work? And have you now got lots of new people working on this?
The time and headspace is essential, but I don't think you necessarily need loads of it. We had our North Star vision that I've spoken about, and that led us to include this kind of impact innovation as a really clear goal within our strategy. So that was kind of the first step, I think, to say, look, this is part of how we deliver our mission, and this is going to be something that we're going to focus on over the next 3 to 5 years. And we worked with our board of trustees all the way through this to build their understanding and commitment, and in fact brought a couple of new trustees onto the board who had an innovation background as well, which has been hugely helpful. And the board agreed to set aside a relatively small amount of seed funding, if you like, to create this capacity, this time and space. Working on this at the minute to give you a sense of what that looks like. It's some of my time. It's not all of my time, but some of my time. And I have one person in my team working with me on this. So we're really small, but we're trying to maximize our impact in the best way that we can.
I understand you're in the early stages, but could you just tell us about how you created space as an organization to be able to do this work alongside some of your more bread and butter services like your frontline service delivery?
I would say that is really hard. I'll be very honest about that. Oftentimes in charities, it's the urgent that wins, and we still struggle with that every day. As a service, a deliverer of frontline services, you're dealing with people in crisis. Often you don't have access to the resources that you really need to meet those needs that people are presenting with. And then, of course, we have our amazing fundraisers who are also on the front line, chasing down funding in difficult circumstances. So, charities are a place where people work under pressure, and we're trying to make a difference to people's lives. And so I do think that carving out space and time and allocating some, albeit small, resource to this kind of work can feel countercultural, I suppose, but it's absolutely necessary. We need to, as charities, I think, be able to protect time, to think differently, to see things from different perspectives, to build those networks, those new relationships, and to build the infrastructure that you need, however nimble that is. You need time and headspace to do that. It's really not easy. It can feel like you're stepping back when really you want to step in and help those people that are there in the here and now.
And how do you communicate that both internally and externally? I can imagine for a large charity, as you said, with very high level of demand, you're really working extremely hard in your frontline service delivery, but also externally, you rely on fundraising. How do you communicate to your donors and to people in your team who might be a little bit skeptical about what's going on here and are we wasting our time, that this is a really worthwhile initiative to be investing in?
That is a good question, and I don't think I have all the answers for that. We're learning as we're doing it. In terms of communicating this with colleagues, I think having the North Star vision, having our strategy that responds to that North Star vision has been really important in terms of setting the context for this work. But it is a case of, over time, engaging colleagues in conversations, getting them involved if they want to be involved. If we're looking at whether we want to work with a venture, we would want our amazing social workers to come and, advise us on that and say, actually, this venture's got something that really could work on the front line. This venture, I'm not sure that they're really hitting the mark. So I think it's a long game piece. It's going to take time for people to really understand it and engage in it to the extent that they want to. In terms of funders, I'm all ears for if you have the answers to this. Again, we're really early in this. We haven't really spoken proactively to funders about it yet. We're working on creating some test cases to demonstrate what we're doing and really thinking about our messaging around this, because it is a bit harder to understand why you would go down this route. It's not immediately compelling in the way that perhaps fundraising messages are for, meeting those needs that are presenting in the here and now.
And you're only 3 months in, I think less than 3 months since you launched the Innovation Lab. You mentioned a couple of initiatives that you're considering at the moment. I wonder if you'd be able to tell us a little bit more about the kinds of solutions that you're pursuing, and specifically how you as a charity are making use of your USP assets, for want of better words, in the work that you do supporting children and young people with cancer.
It's a little bit tricky for me to go into exact examples, but I could talk through the area of mental health if that's of use. I'm sure all of your listeners will know that, there is a mental health crisis amongst young people and also adults as well. And the services that are out there to support that need, there's a gap and people's needs are going unmet. And there is a lot of innovation, tech-enabled innovation happening in mental health. Some of it really quite exciting and promising. Some of it we would have questions about. And I think that it's really essential that young people, children even, and families are at the heart of that innovation process. Their voice needs to be built around, these solutions need to be built around their voice. Because what we all want is evidenced, ethical, safe mental health innovations. And I do think that charities have a really unique part to play in that process. What we can bring to that is unique and it's essential, and it can feel scary because what are these innovations? What are they going to do? Nobody knows. But it's also a really exciting opportunity, I think, for charities to play quite an important role in, working towards some of these solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it is a new way of working for a lot of organisations, and it comes with a level of risk that some might not be comfortable with. How are you approaching that notion of risk as an organisation? And do you have an expectation that your private sector partners might be taking more of a share of a risk than you as a charity?
It's an interesting question. I think that what we're doing is we're managing the risk by starting small, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We're not overreaching, we're not overstating what we can do. We are learning how to do this and where the risks lie. And we're starting small and building from there, hopefully with that learning. And I think that's really important in terms of managing risk. But in some ways, charities are amazing at managing risk because we're on the front line delivering services to people that, have really high needs. And charities operate in very risky circumstances where businesses wouldn't want to be. So, I don't think it's always fair to say that charities are risk averse. We just might be more comfortable with taking risk in different ways. Yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question.
No, it does. And I stand corrected on that, of course. And the types of organisations that you are looking to partner with, do you anticipate that they will be seeing financial profit as an important consideration in the products that they're developing?
They absolutely will be considering financial profit. The ventures that we're working with are absolutely impact-driven ventures. So often their investors are impact-first investors. So that is a strong goal for the business, and their business model is built around the impact that they're creating. But they will be seeking profit, particularly if they're going to receive investment from venture capital. That suggests that the business is seeking scale. And when you get scale, you get profit often. So they are profit driven, but I don't think that we should be scared of that. I think we can be part of that if we do it in a responsible way. But what I would say is that this approach of working with ventures, with commercial, operations, with businesses, that is not going to solve all of the problems that young cancer patients face. This is one way to provide some of the solutions that are needed, because commercial models cannot meet complex needs often. That isn't often a scalable proposition. And so there's a limit to what commercial models can do. I think we will always need those frontline services. So this is really about complementing those, amazing frontline services that are already out there, Young Lives versus Cancer and all of the other services that charities deliver. I don't think that they will ever be replaced. I think they will always be essential, but as part of a mix alongside other models as well.
And so obviously some of your potential business partners would use profit as a way of measuring success. But in terms of the Innovation Lab, how will you measure success of the lab?
We have sort of 3 overarching goals. The number one goal is about impact. So can we deliver impact? So these, as I've explained, these businesses are impact-driven businesses. So they do collect data on the impact that they deliver. And for some of those ventures, we would work with them to agree what those measures are. And we would be seeking to, track that over time and understand both the reach of the impact and the depth of the impact. Our second goal is about learning. So we don't know exactly what this approach could do. And it's really important that we learn from what we're doing. So we will measure that in a completely different way, in a much more qualitative way. But are we learning, and are we bringing that learning into the organisation, and are we sharing it as well externally? And our third goal is, can we make some financial returns? Perhaps we might invest a small amount in a business. Not always, but maybe we will. Perhaps there are other kinds of value exchanges between us and a business. And if we could even break even on this activity in the long term, that would be a win for us. We shall see. It's unknown, but I think the learning is the key, really, to measuring the success of this work.
Do you have any specific goals or targets that you are aiming to achieve within a year, 2 years, 5 years, or is this just not how that works?
I think to see the return on impact, that will be long term. We will see some impact certainly in the earlier years, but I think both for impact and financial returns, if they ever materialise, it's a long game, really, which goes back to the challenges that we spoke about around, the focus of charities is often on the here and now. And the focus of this is less certain and it's longer term. So it's quite different in nature.
And how long term are you looking at? Like, do you anticipate, and has it been discussed, for example, at board level, like we will try this for X number of years, or before we decide, yes, we're absolutely going to go ahead with this and possibly invest in it further, or we're going to take a step back, actually this lab was not such a good idea after all?
I don't feel like there's a clear answer to that, because we are developing new things in parallel. And all of it is an art, not a science. Yeah. And then there are loads of other contextual factors around us that we have to take into account. So it's just really hard to be quite clear and specific about it.
And speaking about learning then, are there any lessons that you've learned that you could share for other charities considering embarking on a similar initiative or way of working?
I would probably say start with what you already have. So think about what you have as a charity, what you might be sitting on, whether it is that access to trusted relationships with families, or whether it's the data that you hold, or maybe your brand is really strong. Think about the assets that you already have, but from different angles, and potentially how that could have value with different kinds of partners. The critical thing, as I've mentioned earlier, is having the time and permission, really, to do this kind of work. As I say, it doesn't need to be huge amounts of time, but you need to allocate time to it and protect it. Be clear that that's what you're doing with it. It needs leadership, attention, it needs breathing space. And I do think that charities can do this sort of impact innovation work brilliantly. I think we have a really unique place in the wider system to do that kind of work. I know lots of other charities see themselves as innovators. And of course, charities have been doing this for centuries. We've been at the leading edge of social innovation for hundreds of years. And I think it's really important that we continue to do that into the future.
And you mentioned forming relationships as a key part of the work in preparation for the launch of the lab. And as you say, this is nothing new, innovation in the voluntary sector, but thinking specifically about solutions co-developed with private sector experts, tech firms, whoever it's going to be, is in some ways quite new. Are there any useful kind of resources for charities or any kind of working groups that you're aware of or that you found to be particularly useful in terms of cross-charity collaboration in driving innovation and in driving work in this space?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of this area of working with venture, whether that's just partnering or whether that's partnering and investing, there are a number of other charities already doing this. You know, they're ahead of us, they're ahead of the game, and more charities sort of considering it as well as a potential way forward. So there is quite a vibrant little network of charities, NGOs who are really keen to work with each other, to share learning and to create this kind of approach together and think about what that could look like in the future. It feels like, as you say, we're quite early on as a sector in doing this kind of work. Generally speaking, we're in the foothills, so we're all learning. You know, it's a school day for me every day, so we're all learning, but there is a sense that we could be building towards something bigger over time if we work together and collaborate in the way that we are.
So is it fair to say, do you think, that there's like an absence of structured community?
We're in the early days of structured communities. There are a couple of groups that are emerging as formalized groups, but if anybody listening wants to learn more, is interested in this kind of work, or maybe has even started experimenting in this area, please do reach out to me, get in touch. I love to learn from what other people are doing, and also, you know, very happy to share our experiences as well and make connections if that's helpful.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like a very enticing invitation to me. Helen, it's been a real pleasure to hear all about the Innovation Lab, the work that's been done, and very exciting times ahead by the sounds of it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Helen, and that's it for this episode. Next week, we'll be doing something a little bit different. It will just be the Third Sector team in the studio discussing some of the recent sector developments. From all of us at Third Sector, thank you so much for listening. Remember, we love hearing from you via our listener survey, which is always open. You can find the link to it in the show notes to this episode, and it's an opportunity to send us your thoughts, your feedback, your suggestions on things that we should be doing in the future. Our producer is Nav Powell.